Okay, chances are you know about Elmer Leonard, even though you never really researched it. You've seen some of his movies. That books have been adapted as movies, and we're going to talk about what I regard one of his best ones of the 1997, when everybody was hitting a home run with this movie. Everybody was top of their game, and everybody was really sought after. It's a little outdated now. It's kind of if you want to know what 1997 looks like, you get this movie. Written by one of who I regard as one of my favorite authors of all time, Elmer Leonard.
Fair enough. And I think what's beautiful about Out of Sight, which is the film we're talking about today, is that Elmore Leonard, you may not even know his name, but very much like Philip K. Dick, you've probably seen something based on his work.
Yes.
Even if you have no idea existed. Like, I saw Jackie Brown for the first time, not knowing who Elmore Leonard was. I mean, of course, even the film's name is different than the book's name. Justified, lots of people love that show, but maybe not people know.
It's a character space off in a different story. If you don't know if it's Elmer Leonard, everybody in the movie doesn't have a regular job. Definitely is going to be
Yeah, they really kind of make you jealous for, like, if you're living that 9-to-5 life, you're like, something's going on because I'm not doing what these people are doing. So, hey, we're going to break down Out of Sight today on Kyle and Nick on Film. George Clooney, Jennifer Lopez, and two guys just as good looking talking about him. So, here we are.
Out of Sight! Hi, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and with me is Kyle Goethe from Goethe Film Reviews. And today we're going to talk about a movie that I kind of regard as a footnote for movies of the 90s because it came out at a time when everybody was at top of their game. Sought after Steven Soderbergh, who was a successful career. He did the one for myself, one for the major studios. He did that constantly throughout his career. This is, of course, the one for the studios.
Yeah, and for him, I was reading this neat little piece where he talked about how he was given an opportunity to direct this film, but he really had another passion project he was focused on. I think it was Joel Silver that said, these kinds of deals don't come along often, so you should really pay attention. And yeah, I think that kind of emboldened the fact he knew this would get him to the next level to be able to make the films he wanted to make. And, I think successfully enough. If you don't know what the film is about, it's... I struggled to come up with a tone for it. It's kind of a crime rom-com. Involves
it's more comedy than I remembered. Yeah.
George Clooney plays Jack Foley, an attractive kind of con man slash criminal.
Very...
I mean, I think at one point they say he's robbed over 200 banks or something like that, and yet he's never used a weapon. And he finds himself in a situation where he's breaking out of prison and comes across a U.S. Marshal played by Jennifer Lopez,
who just so happens to be at the location doing paperwork,
visiting a boy, doing something around there. And she kind of comes into it. He kidnaps her, and then he finds himself rather taken with her, and they begin this cat and mouse chase that we're not sure if it's a romantic chase or a serious, like, I'm hunting a criminal kind of a chase.
Yeah,
it's a very unusual relationship.
It's very much a play on them. Yeah,
and I found myself at first not really believing it, diving into the relationship, but I think the two of them played so well and they have such terrific chemistry.
Yeah, that's really headed up.
That central relationship really does stand well, even for two characters who barely meet through the entire film.
I think that's what the marketing is. The whole movie is based on Jack Foley and Karen Sisco corresponding. Are they conning each other? Can they figure out whether they're being truthful to each other? One's on both sides of the, one's a bad guy, one's a good guy. This actually did win an award, Best Adapted Screenplay, from Scott Frank, who after reading the book that third time, have profound that this actually makes the book look more better than it is, even though I'm a huge Elmore Leonard fan, because how he really cut up the movie, where in the book you start out with the breakout of the prison, and you go linear there. Here you start with him with the interview, and then calms himself down and goes back to his normal ways. So it's a little bit cut up a little bit lower, almost like a Tarantino-esque kind of.
Yeah, they filmed it probably in order and then just cut the puzzle pieces around and shuffled them where they needed to. What I found really interesting is, we talked about just last week with The Keep, how a book and a film need to stand separate and be their own thing. And that's what I really appreciate when people adapt Elmore Leonard, is I've read a few of his works and seen the corresponding film treatments to them. And they're very different usually, but his is very indicative of a book. Like his is a book writing. Yeah. And then there is the film version of those events. And I think that's where Scott Frank does a really great job here. He also did a lot of other work. He's done, I think,
Adapt
Logan, and then The Lookout, which was his directorial film.
Yeah, you adapt enough screenplays, they're going to give you
give you one of your own. And I think he's a very talented storyteller on the page.
Yeah.
He doesn't usually waste a lot of time. And even though this film does, for me, lag a little bit after that first hour mark, as we're kind of like assembling the pieces for what we want to get to in our crime film.
Yeah.
I think overall he gets the characters right, which is really tough to do when they're all wisecrack and snappy dialogue driven people. So,
and especially you want to root for them, even though they're bad people. You want to have some kind of like, you feel sorry for them. You have some kind of charisma to them, even though they're doing awful things. I want to talk about, this is a great supporting cast, and a lot of people that were in this movie are famous now that weren't famous back then. So you have like Don Cheadle, really kind of a breakout movie for him. You have Viola Davis making an appearance, Isaiah Washington making an appearance, and a little bit startup of Steve Zahn, kind of stealing a little bit.
I don't think Steve Zahn was really anyone. No offense, Steve. At that point, he wasn't like he had. I think his big breakout comedic performance was Saving Silverman a few years later.
Yeah.
And then he's been kind of on the surface, bubbling around things like Joyride. I really loved him in War for the Planet of the Apes. He's a great character actor, and I really like what you had told me about his character before going into the film. It's like we don't see Steve Zahn's character very much. We hear about him more than we see him. Yeah. And it adds to the character when he does show up. You're thinking, there's no way he's that dumb. There's no way he's that bumbling. And then in about 5 seconds, you're like, he is, isn't he?
The character Glenn Michaels is far more important. It's far more fun in the movie than in the book. The book is just kind of a bubbling idiot, but Steve Zahn takes it and just makes it his own. And it's actually entertaining when he's in the movie and you see him how he thinks he's a lot smarter than he really is.
Yeah, exactly. But then even too, people who hadn't gotten as famous, Jennifer Lopez was not really an actress at this point.
No.
I heard that she had to do a screen test. She did the trunk scene of the film with George Clooney on his couch, which I thought was a very, very weird way to like get used to.
But that's in the book.
You have to get the chemistry, and I guess that really does work with the chemistry.
And it's in the book. It's like 20 pages of dialogue of them in the trunk together, of them kind of wrestling.
Yeah, and it's a scene that, on the surface, you can ask the questions of why does George Clooney get into the trunk when he could just as easily get in the back of the vehicle. Yeah. But once they're in there, you get a great dialogue piece. You get some real good character building, and it's a unique. Very often you don't get a dialogue-driven trunk scene, so that's kind of cool.
The funny thing is, in the book, actually, when they're in the truck, they all talk about movies, previous movies, like Bonnie and Clyde. They talk about Network. They talk about all these, Robert Redford in 3 Days in a Condor. So someone's like this homage to movies while they're stuck in the trunk.
Yeah, and I like that Clooney's character, that Jack Foley is talking about films, but he's not like snobbish in any way. When he quotes Network, he misquotes it. He doesn't really he misquotes probably the most famous line in that movie, one of the most famous lines in cinema, and he misquotes it pretty poorly. Yeah. He's got that kind of attitude about him where he's willing to chit chat about things, but he's not really as smart as he thinks he is. He's just good at the one thing he's good at, which is robbing banks. That's why when he's offered a job later on in the film doing something as menial as security, he doesn't want it because he's good at his one thing, even if it's a bad thing.
And it's something like a power. And definitely this is a movie about power, hierarchy. Because in the beginning, George Clooney is actually in prison, and he's, people leave him alone. Everybody, he's charming, and, he can handle himself. Mm-hmm. But the person that can't handle himself is Albert Brooks' character, Ridley.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was him until we see the scenes of him outside of prison, the before and after stuff, because he's just so dressed down and he's just kind of greasy and kind of gross looking in the film.
But in prison, he is the lower on the totem pole. But outside of prison, he's high up. Mm-hmm. He's higher than George Clooney. And it's funny because he's ridiculing George Clooney about being a bank robber. So were you.
Yeah, just a different kind.
Just a different kind.
He was less, and neither one of them used weapons. They used their minds to manipulate a system. What's great about George Clooney is we think of him and he's this attractive, suave, handsome, kind of knows how to work his way in. Kind of thing, yeah. But in this time in his career, he was playing a lot of criminals. He was playing, Ocean's 11 came out a few years after this, of course. Yeah. From Dusk Till Dawn was pretty in line with this as well. In fact, they use his mugshot in From Dusk Till Dawn as his mugshot in this film. I had to pause, zoom, and look it up. It's there. And I think that's kind of funny because Jennifer Lopez says, that's not even what he looks like. No. He played criminals for a good stretch of his time here. And as you go on, he does kind of dip into that villainous role every once in a while. Yeah. Things like The Ides of March. On anti-hero.
But he has a more cold, this is non-threatening.
Yeah, less of a protagonist, more just an antagonist, not a bad guy, but just kind of a jerk. And I think that's where he does really well, is he can play a jerk and he's not afraid to either.
One of the nice things is the cameo appearance, because they have a little bit of Nancy Allen in this movie. We talked about her being with Brian De Palma. And a little snapshot of Michael Keaton in this.
Which technically makes Out of Sight a Jackie Brown sequel.
Yeah.
Fight me.
Yeah.
I love when this kind of stuff can happen because it's not necessary, but it's a little nod to fans. It's the people that like Elmore Leonard's work who would see Jackie Brown and then go on to see this film, and they would kind of get that little feeling of like, that was for me. That was something like a thank you for the fans. Very much in how films don't need to make their book readers happy, but when they do, it's a nice moment.
And Dennis Farina, who plays Karen Sisco's dad, he also was in another Elmer Leonard adapted movie, Get Shorty, where he plays as a crime boss. So there's a lot of intersecting, like, keep him going. Yeah.
And what's funny for Farina too is he doesn't really do that much in this film. He's very much he's a support system for her.
Yeah.
And he's kind of just more the receiving end of things for her. And I think he's got a knack for being able to pull the comedy out of crime, stories. Like, he does better when he's kind of dealing with an element of zaniness to it, but he never really feels zany.
I'd like to mention Elliot Davis shot the film, which is kind of, if I say the name now, because he did like movies like Cutting Edge, lots and lots of light. He's very comfortable like using a bright atmosphere. Even when it's dark, it's still kind of overshot almost.
Yeah, and if you look at his work on, if you look at the work that Elliot Davis did with like Twilight, I'm not a big fan of that movie, but
we're talking about how he shot it.
Yeah. There's a lot of brightness to the darkness, not just vampire sparkling, but the way that the light shines in the forest scenes and the way that things play out. I mean, you have vampires, so it's really tough to shoot at light and dark.
Which I like the beginning of Out of Sight, because he comes out of the bank and it's very like shiny and brightness, and you got reflecting light and mirrors, and you got what George Clooney's costume, it fits very well.
Yeah, that's true. What I really took a moment to kind of get to with that opening, because the opening does give you a lot of the tonal flares you're going to see throughout the rest of the film, is the editing by Anne V. Coates, who of course did like Lawrence of Arabia and a number of other films throughout her career. This one opens and there's that weird moment where we get freeze frames for like a second.
Yes.
Kind of manipulate the film, and it's almost like her pointing out to you, like, that's where you should look. This is what you should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it for the first 2 minutes of the movie, and then I kind of like fell in line with what the goal of that was.
You get a little danger zone because it's almost like they're spoon feeding it to you. If you use that instrument a little too much, it gets kind of...
Yeah, and it's almost come to define Soderbergh's some of his work in a lot of ways. Because we get that a little bit in Ocean's 11 and those films. We get it in like some of his more comedic work. His less flashy directing. And I think it works.
There's another thing is I signed this into the sleek noirs that came out in the 90s, and this is actually the tail end. This is actually, I would say, the last of it, the bookmark of it. And you think when you say of like Romeo's Bleeding and Reservoir Dogs of the sleek suit noirs, this is kind of the end of it, and we're transitioning to other stuff.
Kind of the Bahama Mama noirs,
Yeah, and it kind of evolution. The evolution went off into like Ocean's 11 with the sleek suit noirs and crime stories. Let's talk about Louis Guzman.
Okay.
You've seen Louis Guzman. You just don't know it yet.
It hurts me to say he's not a layered actor, because every role he plays is very much the same.
Yes.
That doesn't make him any less likable. He's so this along with Boogie Nights, right in that late 90s era where he just kind of played himself and was just having fun, and he's a likable actor. I think
he looks like he just stumbled into a wrong door and he came in an audition and he's like, well, I'm here.
Yeah. I like the introduction to his character at the beginning of the film, how you're introduced before you meet him. You get the scene with Jack talking to the guard about how he's aware of a prison break, and then he goes and speaks to the people that he's trying to push into prison breaking. You almost feel sorry for him, even though he's a guy who's going to break out of jail. And I don't know what he did. I don't know if they really tell us what he did. They don't. They're really, yeah. But you probably don't want him getting back out. I think that's fair to point out as well. That's just another one of those like small character moments, though.
Lastly, I put out Elmer Leonard with his writing tips always emphasize put the weather in your story and make it relevant to the characters. This is a good example of Elmer Leonard using his own techniques, because you have the hot Miami, you have a little bit of LA, you have in the winter of Detroit. All emphasize the transition of weather involved in your characters and your stories. It is masterful.
Yeah, I missed the title card when they said they were going to Detroit. I must have looked at my watch or something, but I looked up and I saw the cold weather, and I immediately had this feeling like I know what part of the country they're in, and then I realized I'm like, oh, they're already in Detroit. So it took me a second, and but I think that's a beautiful way of introducing us, where if you didn't even have the title card, I'm pretty sure people can put together that, oh, they've made it now, they're in that sequence. How the weather affects, and that's again how it's shot too. that's shot in the way where
it's like very
pastel.
pastel, overly pastel for Miami, and then the prison you got to work with colors of grays and the oranges and stuff like that.
Out and
and it's very. I'll emphasize, it's an Elmer Leonard because nobody has a regular job, and if they do, they're probably just a cop.
Yeah, the most regular job is probably cop, criminal, or movie business. Because he writes a lot of the stuff that ends up making its way into the Hollywood system is stuff set in Hollywood in LA, and good guys, bad guys, and people in the business who are usually both.
Yeah, I do like the little play that's added into the movie that's not really into the book of George Clooney able to flick a lighter on. It's like a little bit of a talent that I don't think I've tried to do it. It hurts.
Yeah.
So I don't know how he is able to flick a lighter. It's almost like a non-necessary skill, but it shows that he has some kind of a talent.
I think for me, it kind of told me that he's good at a lot of things that are useless in normal life.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I saw when he does it, because it's a cool talent, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
Yes.
And it's kind of like his ability to work his way through a room and rob a bank without using a gun is a great talent, but it doesn't really make your life it doesn't progress your life anywhere.
Perfect. Right when you said it, yes, I agree. That's
for me, it feels like George Clooney's character is very much a VCR that's been pressed to pause, and he's just sitting there that whole movie because he has all these opportunities when he could escape, literally escape the situation, get out and move on to something else, and he kind of keeps diving back into these poor choices, and thankfully he's just good at wiggling his way out.
I always talk about there's always somebody kind of like a conscious character, somebody that kind of knows that they're in the story, that's aware of the surroundings, and I would say that Buddy Ving Rhames is a conscientious character in the story, that he kind of knows that, hey, come on, you're playing games here, let's just get the job moving.
What I like about Ving Rhames is that he's able to play these villainous characters usually with a heart of gold, when he wants to, and I think that's indicative of his work here. He calls his sister and confesses and tells her everything he's doing wrong with his life, even though she reported him to the cops and got him arrested before the very crime he was going to commit.
Yes,
there's some pre-crime for you.
Or he steals the car at the grocery store. He's so nice about it.
Yeah, I'll just take your car. He's got that thing where kind of a villainous character in the sense that you shouldn't want to be like him, but he's so cool.
But you're breaking the law.
There's a reason why he's worked with Tarantino, is because Tarantino knows how to make bad people look good. Yeah. Soderbergh kind of took on that persona as well with the film. He's probably the moral character, which is odd to say when he's
out of all these people, because even Cisco's boss, it's obviously he has motivations of just I want to move on up and I want to show off.
Yeah, and that's apparent in the scene where he decides to use the ram to get into the apartment.
Shows
She's
how
like,
smart
how would that actually work? And kind of puts him in his place on there, even though he's been questioning her own motives the whole film. There's a lot of play with characters that don't get a lot of screen time, but they get a character in there. They squeeze one in really nicely, and it's a difficult thing to do, and it's pulled off well.
So I recommend seeing it. If you love Steven Soderbergh, there is a huge following of people who love Soderbergh fans. This is a marquee. If you like Elmer Leonard, this is a mark. Everybody's on top of the game. This is, when this came out, it was sold as all the people that are sought after.
Yeah. If anything, the only reason the film I don't think is memorable is in the main pop culture memory right now is because it came out in June during peak of blockbuster season. It's not a blockbuster. I don't think it would be possible to sell the film as a blockbuster except for its cast. It's got a great cast. Just should have come out later in the year with the more prestige genre pictures. I think a September, November release would have done this one well, and it just did not come out at the right time.
Timing is everything, especially in movies.
Yep, and this, films, you get two different Batmans in the movie produced by a penguin, and I think this is just it should be seen and it should be discovered more. My only qualms with the film, as I said before, after the first hour, there is a bit of a lull for about 20 minutes as we kind of put our pieces in play to get to our big finale. And the big finale, there's some good shots fired. Somebody shoots his. Well, we'll just get to that later.
And I regard it as a trilogy: Jackie Brown, Get Shorty, and Out of Sight. Some kind of a trilogy. They all came out relatively the same kind of amount of time.
Absolutely, so, In fact, this movie actually inspired a TV show that lasted for 7 episodes called Karen Cisco that did not star Jennifer Lopez. So there you go. There's our thoughts on the movie Out of Sight from 1998. Please give us your thoughts on the film down below. We want to hear what you think about it. Definitely worth checking out. And hey, if you like this video, click like. It's that simple. It takes you maybe 2 seconds. Here. There you go. You had time to click it. Now you're here. If you want to see more of our content, 'cause we have new episodes coming out every single week, click that subscribe button and you can check us out every week. We got new episodes coming to you. And hey, you can also check out the Patreon, patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm.
Be part of the team.
Teams. Yep. You can help us discuss which films we're going to discuss on future episodes. We're always looking for that feedback. And like we always say, Nick and I could talk about just about any movie for any amount of time. It's a little bit easier if you tell us what you want to hear. So that's all for us, guys. You can check out my many film reviews on goatfrommovies.com and check me out every week here. Nick, where can we find you?
You can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and now on Amazon Radio.
There you go.